Well, welcome back. In this video, we're once again in John chapter 8, and it's a really long chapter, 59 verses. We are obviously not going to read all of those. We're going to skip over some things. And a lot of what we're going to skip over is along the lines of things we've already talked about in the last few videos. This ongoing question of who Jesus is, the growing tension between him and the religious leaders in Israel. So if you read the whole chapter, which I'd encourage you to do, you're going to see a lot of interaction between Jesus and the Pharisees, even some interaction between Jesus and some Jews who it says had believed in him, but clearly they don't really understand who he is. There's a lot of tension. They're challenging Jesus. They're calling him names. They accuse him of being demon-possessed. He says they are from below, that they're children of the devil. It's pretty intense, and it's more than I'm going to take on in this short video. What I am going to focus on is just a few statements that Jesus makes in this chapter that stand out. They are some of the more well-known things that Jesus ever said, things that often get quoted, key claims about who he is. So we'll look at a couple of those in this video and then a couple more in the next one. And we'll start with the one that comes right away in verse 12, right after the story of the woman caught in adultery that we talked about last time. In verse 12, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And I'll just point out that that's not just a statement about Jesus. That's also a statement about the world and about us. There's an implication in that statement, "I am the light of the world," which is that the world is dark. Jesus is saying that without him, this world doesn't have light. And that's not a popular thing to say right now, not a popular idea in our culture. You and I live in a humanistic society where people want to believe that we all have all the light we need within us. Jesus says no. Jesus says this world is dark and you need my light. Now, he did say in the book of Matthew chapter 5, "You are the light of the world." But that was a statement to his followers, not to people in general. When you read it in context, it's clear that it's because they are his followers that they have his light to share with the world, which is dark. So the question is, do you believe that? Do you believe that the world is dark and Jesus is the light? Do you believe that what he claims here is true, that without him, we walk in darkness? And then the next statement that I'll point out, just a quick one, is where he says in verse 27 that they will know who he is when they have lifted him up. When you have lifted up the Son of Man, it says. Now, that's a reference to his cross, which they did not understand at the time, but which we now do understand. And there's a very similar statement in chapter 12 that we'll spend more time on when we get there. For now, it's just a hint, just kind of some foreshadowing. I want to make sure we notice it. It's always important to remember that when we read the Gospels, we have this advantage over the people who were living at the time because the life and teachings of Jesus ultimately make the most sense in light of the cross. But we'll talk more about that in future videos. And then just one more statement. In verse 31, Jesus says, "If you hold to my teaching, then you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And that's one of those statements of Jesus that has made its way into popular culture, at least one part of it, the truth will set you free, that part. People say that all the time without really realizing that it means something much more specific than what they are, how the way that they're using it. First of all, Jesus is not saying all truth sets you free, as if anytime anyone learns any kind of truth, then they are free. He says, then you will know the truth. And then the truth will set you free. And the then there is when you hold on to his teaching. So gaining the truth isn't as simple as stumbling across the right article on the internet, as much as we would all like to think it is. Jesus says we don't find real truth until we start to obey his teachings. It's about more than hearing the truth. It's about living it. That's when we come to understand it and to find more of it. That's when we see things for what they really are. That's when this freedom comes, when we start to obey Jesus. And then there's the fact that this is also a statement that implies something. If Jesus says, then you'll be free, the implication is that right now you're not. When he claims to be able to set us free, he's saying that right now we're slaves to something. And the crowd picks up on that. In verse 33, they're insulted. They say, we're children of Abraham. We're not slaves. And Jesus' response is another key statement. Verse 34, I tell you truly, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. This is another example of people thinking materialistically and Jesus thinking spiritually. Well, they're saying, I'm no slave. There are no chains on me. Jesus is saying there are chains on your heart, and there are chains on the heart of every single person because every single person sins and they are then enslaved to sin. And this is a pretty key difference between Christian teaching and humanism, which says that people are basically good. Christianity says there is much good in people. We're made in the image of God. There are a lot of good things in us, but there's not enough good in us. We can't be perfect. We'll never be perfect. We'll never attain holiness. We'll never earn the right to be in the presence of God because we cannot not sin. There's this thing called sin in our flesh. We will not always do the right thing. And we just don't have it within ourselves to fix ourselves as much as we want to believe that. That's why we need Jesus, the light in this dark world. We need his light to shine into our dark hearts. And as he says in verse 36, if the Son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. So Jesus brings truth into our lives. Jesus brings light into our lives. He sets us free like no one else can. That's what he claims to be able to do for us. And we're going to look at some more of the things he says about himself and about us in the next video.